God,
God,
grant
Grant us
me
the
the
serenity
serenity
to accept the
to
things
accept
accept
the
the
things
things
I
I
cannot
cannot
change,
the
the
courage to
courage to
change the
courage
things
to
we
change
can,
change
the
the
things
things
I
I
can,
can,
and the
and the
wisdom
and the
wisdom to
to
wisdom
know the
know
to
the difference.
difference.
know the difference.
All right. So I have asked Carol to read the 12 steps of Debtors Anonymous. And, oh, I think Carol has joined us.
Yes, I am here. Thank you. The 12 steps of Debtors Anonymous. Step 1, we admitted we were powerless over debt, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand God. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove these defects of character. 7, humbly asked God to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people, wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understand God, praying only for God's will for us and the power to carry that out. And 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to compulsive debtors and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. So this workshop is sponsored by the Sedona Into Action DA meeting in Sedona, Arizona. We welcome everyone to come join us on that meeting if you feel free, if you feel like it. They are at 5 p.m. Arizona time every Monday night. Your donations for today's workshop help our meeting send our general service representative to the DA World Service Conference. A suggested donation is $20, but we want people to live within their spending plans. No one will be turned away for lack of funds, but we encourage you to give generously as you can. Please indicate that donations are for the GSR workshop fundraiser. Contributions can be mailed to our treasurer, Audrey C., at Audrey Cosper, that's AudreyCosper, P.O. Box 761, Overgaard, Arizona, and I'll spell that. That's Overgaard, and then Arizona is AZ, the zip code 85933. And if you're mailing a check, it should be made out to DA Group 1315. PayPal contributions are also possible through sedonada@gmail.com. That's sedonada@gmail.com. And either way, a check or PayPal, it would be good if you wrote workshop contribution. Okay, this information will be repeated at the end of the meeting, and Audrey will put the address and email address in the chat window. Thank you very much for your contributions. All right, we would like to invite you to our next workshop, and we will get to speakers pretty soon. We would like to invite you to our next workshop, which will be held at the same time on Sunday, February 23rd of this year. The topic will be sought through prayer and meditation, practicing techniques for connecting with our higher power. So we'll be doing some practical techniques on that day, February 23rd. Okay, so now we will go ahead and hear from our speakers as they share their experience finding connection with their higher power. Each speaker will have 20 minutes to share. And our first speaker will be Jennifer M. So Jennifer, how would you like time warnings to go?
Why don't you give me 10 minutes and 5 minutes?
Okay, so 10-minute warning and a 5-minute warning.
And if
before Kimberly starts, it looks like Kimberly has her hand up.
Okay, just before you start, Jennifer,
Sure.
go ahead, Kimberly. Do you have something you'd like to say?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you wanted me to send the flyer out real quick to remind everybody. It's not, looks like maybe people forgot, and if you put it in the chat, I can blast it to everybody's message if you want.
I can try and attach it to the chat, Kimberly.
Okay, and I'll do that while we're listening. Sorry for interrupting.
Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. So Jennifer, can you share about yourself and go for it whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you guys, everyone. I am Jennifer. I'm a compulsive spender, debtor, and money addict. And I started in September of 2001. And, you know, as I looked at, or as I was thinking about the topic and this connection, I have to kind of think about back to when I first came in the room. And anyway, I had come in, and I won't share that piece of my story. It's I just kind of crashed and burned into this room, I'll put it that way. But when I arrived, and I'm really grateful for the meeting that I first went to, because, you know, for a long time I traveled a lot for work. And so when I would have those opportunities, I would go to different meetings in different cities. And, you know, every meeting is different. I think that's why they really were encouraged to, if you go to a meeting and it doesn't resonate, go to another meeting. That one might resonate. Keep going till you find that meeting that really speaks to you and where you hear the things you need to hear. But the meeting that I first went to, it was a very, and I still go to, is a very solid DA meeting, a lot of recovery, follows the traditions really, really well. But one thing I will say, unlike some meetings I've been to in other parts of the world, they were very there wasn't religion in the meeting. It was really everybody felt welcome. And because I've been to meetings where I was kind of like, is this a 12-step meeting or am I in church? And so I'm very grateful that the meeting I happened to go to was like that, because without a doubt, the when I came into DA, I had no connection with my higher power. And one of the early sponsors I had, I now realize my higher power was always there. I just wasn't listening. And so I know my higher power never abandoned me, never left me. And there were just times when I was blocking him out. Um, Kind of growing up in my life, I had kind of an interesting, and I want to just say, I find my higher power in a few key places. One is in the group. And at the very beginning, because I really had no connection with a higher power of my own, whatever I felt was right. You know, my first sponsor, who I'm grateful, she had about 10 years in AA before she got into DA. So she had some really solid recovery. And so she said, you know, until you're ready, you can just use the group as your higher power. And so for me, the group was my higher power. And every time I went to a meeting, it was like connecting to my higher power. And so I happened to be in a step study, which I personally, working the steps for me has been a way to get connected to my higher power, stay connected to my higher power. If I find myself where I'm feeling like, you know, I'm not sure I'm hearing my higher power enough, or I'm not sure I'm listening very well, I know my answer is to go back, find a group of people who want to rework the steps and start the steps again. And that really, really does it. And it happened that this step study I was in, this was in 2002. And so the wonderful, wonderful book that was recently published didn't exist. And so we were using one of those kind of contraband step studies on, copy paper that was floating around the fellowship. And, but you know what? I have for me, it worked because it was the one that I think it's known for like having 157 questions or something in step 4 or anyway, but that's what we were using. And I realize now it really didn't matter. We had a group of us who came together. We stayed with it. And I think a lot of it was we stayed with it because of each other and showing up for each other and not dropping out because I'd let the rest of the group down. But regardless, what it meant is that I got through the steps. And it happened that there was a lot of writing in there about talking about what was your relationship with God or your relationship with religion growing up. And I had never given that any thought whatsoever. Um, and as I started to write and answer those questions, I realized how somewhat bizarre it was, my relationship growing up. We went to, at different times, we went to a Presbyterian church, we went to a Methodist church, but my mother had been raised Serbian Orthodox, and the message I received was the real God was down the street at the Serbian Orthodox church. And I was going someplace where this other kind of not the real one was going to be. And so I always kind of thought I was kind of doing it second class. The other thing was it really wasn't about the experience of going to a church and really hearing what I now hear inside 12-step rooms, quite frankly, hearing about what my higher power can do and will do for me. It was about looking perfectly and going and sitting quietly to the point where I was allowed to take Nancy Drew mystery books as long as I held them down below the pews so that no one could see them and sit in church and read so that I would be meticulously quiet and people would marvel at what a good child I was. And that was the important thing. So the bottom line was I didn't really have a foundation. We didn't talk about it at home. We didn't talk about, um, you know, God, the only time I heard, kind of at home, a parent talking to God was when my mother, um, I was an I am an only child. I was born 15 years after my parents were married, and I was the end of my mother's career is what it really came down to. And it was very hard for her to be stuck at home with a child. And so I heard a lot of the praying I heard was, "Oh my God, why did you punish me with this horrible child?" And so that was prayer in our house. So so then, I kind of wandered through teens and other years, and I was married for the first time, and he happened to be Catholic, so I converted to Catholicism, and but by the time I came into the DA rooms, I was divorced. I was completely without any kind of connection to a higher power. Um, so I came in and I started hearing this possibility of something greater than myself. And for me, that is so much what my higher power is. It is that belief that something is bigger than me. And one of the things I've learned in terms of, character defects is that one, I can try to be I'm good at being in control. Two, I'll take on all the responsibility you want to give me. They love me at work, but when you carry that into your personal life, it doesn't always go so well. And I think what I started to realize is, oh my God, I don't have to do it alone. I don't have to carry the entire world on my shoulders and go through life with that burden. And I have something bigger than me that's actually looking out for me. Um, so I began to, as I said, I was in this step study and I began to believe and I began to, I don't know, it was just, I could feel this presence. And I still strongly feel for me that my higher power still shows up so much in the rooms. My higher power shows up when I connect with another DA person, when I take a phone call. I don't think those things are by chance. I believe my higher power is looking out for me. I don't think he has master plan, but he is looking out for me. And it showed up the day I showed up in my first DA meeting. I don't know if anyone on this call has ever heard my story. I think maybe Chris has because I spoke at a Sedona meeting, but I said I crashed and burned. The way I got into DA was
That's 10 minutes, Jennifer.
Thank you, Carol.
That's 10 minutes.
I was fired for embezzling $189,377 from the company that I worked for. And so when I came into DA, I was basically I was biding time till the new life insurance policy kicked in to take care of my kids. I had two children at the time, they were 8 and 10. And I was going to kill myself because I thought that is the best answer for everybody around. And, but all these miracles happened. And they are miracles. I was referred to an attorney who helped me through a process of making restitution. And, that wasn't by chance. That was higher power showing up. She referred me to a therapist. That wasn't by chance. And so all of a sudden I began to work on myself and what was wrong and where my mistakes were happening and what was I doing and, rethinking about what was important. And she's the one who referred me to DA. But I'm still at a place of desperation. So the very first meeting, and at the time, because of the dollar amount I'd embezzled, I was facing, or if I was prosecuted, I would be serving somewhere between 12 to 18 months in prison. And as I said, I had an 8 and a 10-year-old child. So I go to this first meeting, and it was in this beautiful old building here in Dallas, and I go in this lovely room, and it was a fairly small meeting. There were about 10 people. And I sit down next to this woman who's just lovely. Had clearly just come from work, and it was just, you could just kind of see, wow. And it was that thing. Oh, I want to be like her. I'm sitting here having these conversations with my psychologist. Well, maybe I'll become a teacher. She's like, no, if you were a convicted felon, you'll never be a teacher. Well, maybe I'll do, no, it was like my career choices were dwindling fast. I sit down next to her, and the topic that night was living within our means on a spending plan. And of course, at that time, I didn't have a clue what they meant. Spending plan, living within our means, none of that resonated. But this woman sitting next to me said, well, I really learned how to live within my means while I was in prison. And here was this incredible, beautiful woman, clearly who had a job, had a nice job, and it turns out she'd served 44 months in prison for embezzling $800,000. And I know now that was my higher power because that gave me this teeny tiny kernel of hope that, okay, I can get through this. I can get through this. And every time I went to a meeting, that hope just kept growing and it kept growing. And I kept realizing this higher power was there. And I actually,
That's 5 minutes.
Thank you, Carol. I had almost a turning point of believing there's a higher power. As I'm going through all the step study and things, my husband and I both love music. I'm remarried. I have an amazing life. I rebuilt an amazing career. There's so many miracles. Again, that was higher power. Um, but I was listening to one of our favorite artists, and Eric Clapton wrote a song years ago. And interesting, before he got into recovery, I share that because he's very open about his own recovery. And it's called The Presence of the Lord. And it is a song that talks about, I have finally found a way to live in the presence of the Lord. And the verses are beautiful. And I don't know, that was like a turning moment for me. And I just, it just all, I went, oh my God, I'm not alone. I want to really fast come forward. I know I'm almost out of time, but I stay connected with my higher power by doing prayer and meditation every day. I'm terrible at meditation, but I do the prayer and I try to pause and I try to listen. That's where my higher power shows up. Again, my higher power shows up in meetings, in people, and in the program. The program is really my spiritual base and my higher power. If I'm ever losing connection, all I know is I go to a meeting and my higher power is like, good to see you. Let's get reconnected and let's stay together. So anyway, I think I'll stop there. Very grateful to be here, grateful to have gotten to share. And thank you to everybody. And thanks, Chris, for the invitation.
All right. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Took me a moment to figure out where my unmute button was. Thank you very much, Jennifer. That was a very nice share. I appreciate it very much. And Jennifer, we have an opportunity. If you wish to share your contact information, you may do that. I'm not sure if I made it clear ahead of time that we would love for you to stay for the second presenter and for a Q&A portion. Okay, cool. Would you like to share contact information now?
I will drop it in the chat,
Okay,
and that way it'll be there for anyone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. So our second speaker today is Meryl M. So Meryl, oh, Adamine's got her hand up. Go ahead, Adamine.
I'll keep time.
Okay, thank you.
If you just let me know what you'd like, Meryl.
Yeah, sounds good.
Oh, wait, this might be Carol here. She's back.
That's her number. Yeah.
Carol, are you with us yet?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Sorry, got knocked off the call. Thanks.
Perfect timing. Meryl was just about to start.
Oh, good. Oh, gee.
Yeah, would have been bad form for you not to be here, Carol, after you invited
I
me.
know, I know after all this time. I will introduce you, Meryl. I'm delighted to have you here. And Meryl, you always have something to say that I might not want to hear, but I need to hear at that moment. So welcome and thank you. And what kind of time cues would you like, Meryl?
So is it 15 or is it 20? Please remind me.
15, 20.
Okay. So how about telling me when 5 minutes has elapsed, 10 minutes elapsed, and 15 if I'm still speaking?
Okay, you're going to make me work. Great.
Of course. Like that's what we do, right? So thank you everyone for being here. I'm Meryl. I'm a compulsive debtor, and I'm here because I don't want to compulsively debt today. And that's why I keep coming. And I've been to this meeting before, so it's nice to see some familiar faces. And Jennifer, thank you so much. I really loved what you had to say. And as you hear my share, you are going to hear some very similar kinds of things. Not exactly, but it's similar. So, recently I spoke in a meeting in China. A meeting I started when I was going back and forth to China. I had a 10-year contract and COVID interrupted it. So I ended up completing the 9th year of that contract virtually. And then we ceased it because China wasn't really letting people back in. But I needed a DA meeting, and so I started a DA meeting, and I have my home group adopted that group for a while, sent them literature, etc. And I still sponsor the person who started the meeting after I left China. Anyway, so recently I was speaking for them, and since most of them speak Mandarin and they don't speak English, I had to write it in advance and send it to them so they could translate it. And so anyway, I wrote this today. I'm not used to writing up a qualification, but I thought I just asked two of my sponsees to write up their qualifications, and I thought you should write this too. So I'm going to do a little bit a mixed bag. So I'm going to share my story and the journey I've taken through the steps in DA first, and then I'm going to come to what I do daily to connect with my higher power. And I love this topic, by the way. I mean, we're connecting with your higher power through the steps, and then daily, what do you do? I just love it, and I've been bragging about it for the last couple of days and think it's a great topic. So I came into DA first go around in 1983. I was homeless and a corporate vice president. It takes some doing. You have to be pretty self-destructive to accomplish those two things at the same time. I see some nodding. So I was already in another 12-step program, and I thought I had this stuff worked out. I thought I knew how this stuff worked. But as anyone who's in another 12-step program knows, they say the credits don't transfer. So you can do your work in another program and come into DA, and it's like they might as well be speaking Swahili because that doesn't make any sense. So anyway, my higher power revealed itself to me through coincidences. But that is the punchline and not the story. So you'll hear that as I go along a little bit. So when I left a marriage of 8 years with neither a plan nor a place to live, I bounced around for a month till I landed in my brother and his girlfriend's apartment on the Upper West Side of New York. In a room they hadn't finished renovating, so it had holes in the walls and bats. And the window didn't close. And if you live in New York in the winter and the window doesn't close, you freeze your pachangas off, to say the least. I was living on a broken box spring mattress. It was what they had, and they took me in. I had no money because I had been paying for groceries and living expenses with an American Express card. I brought those debts with me, and I had no money to pay for rent or transportation because I was paying the credit card companies what they wanted, and I wasn't taking care of myself. So I didn't know those first steps that you take when you come into DA. I didn't have any idea of that. And I had profit and loss responsibilities for my clients in the firm that I worked for of many millions of dollars. But forget, I had really zero understanding of finance. I thought I had access to all the money in the bank, mine or otherwise, because that's the way I wrote checks and that's the way I used a credit card. And I got insulted when bills came. Very, very young, very immature around money when it was not a professional obligation. So it was only a matter of time before that caught up with me, and I may have ended up in the situation I heard a few minutes ago. So I walked to work with my brother's girlfriend because I didn't have transportation. She liked to walk. And we walked from the Upper West Side of New York to Midtown, the classiest neighborhood, business neighborhood in New York at that time, Rockefeller Center. And I'm homeless and I'm going to work. She was newly sober and she heard about DA at an AA meeting. And she said, why don't we go? So I accompanied her thinking she needs to go. I'm the one who's homeless, but she needs to go. So I went with her, and she stopped going after week 1, and I continued going, but I had no idea what they were talking about. But physically, I understood in some way, because when I went to get up from that first meeting, my knees buckled out from under me and I fell on the ground. That happened to me the second week as well. So something's happening to me, but it's not penetrating up here. I'm not getting it, but I'm getting it physically. I got it somatically.
5 minutes.
Thanks. So The founder of DA was going to the same meetings. There were very few meetings in DA at the time. And he took me under his wing. He taught me a lot. It taught me a lot that was completely new to me. Like, number one, don't use other people's money and you won't debt. He said, get the word borrow out of your vocabulary. Ask people, you want to use their pencil, you want to use their sweater, you want to use their car, whatever. No borrowing. Basic kind of stuff. I'm up here in this conceptual la la land, and he's telling me this basic stuff. Get on a cash basis and everything will work out. That was okay because no one would give me plastic at that point. So that was okay. I was desperate, so I heeded all his counsel and essentially accepted step one. I'm powerless over debt and my life has become unmanageable. So you think that that's a done deal. You'll hear later. Within 2.5 years, I was out of debt. I was sitting on the General Service Board. I'd gotten a new job. I'd gotten several raises. I was breathing easy in my own apartment. Then I was sued by my ex-husband's creditors. He had left the country. I cursed, screamed, ranted, cried in every DA meeting I went to. And after about a week of hearing me do that, John H. and Alex R. at the time pulled me aside and said, it's your debt. You didn't read the fine print. If your husband incurred the debt while you were married, even if you didn't even know that he had that credit card, even if you're not on that credit card, he left the country. They're trying to, get their money back. So I listened to them, and I had abdicated responsibility, I saw, for my life partner's work, what he was doing that could have ramifications on my life. So it's still functioning like an adolescent. So I did what these DA folks told me, recognizing through the process that there was a power greater than me that turned out to be a group of debtors, which restored me to sanity. And I surrendered to this version of my higher power, negotiated with a collection agency in charge of reclaiming that liability. And I took a step 3, which involved me deciding to work the rest of the steps and not just be satisfied with getting the wolf away from my door. I'd been blaming my ex for problems with debting, but taking step 4, my higher power revealed to me in my searching and fearless moral inventory from an autobiographical statement, which was the first step 4 I took. My mother said to me when I was quite young that money burned a hole in my pocket. And then in 4th grade, we had a savings project. You had to open a savings account and save something over the course of 6 months and, buy that thing to learn, financial literacy. Well, I did that, bought the bike, and never saved again until I was 36 years old and came into DA. So it didn't really work. So these were early warning signs, unheeded. In step 5, I shared these and many other deep, dark secrets, which, you have your own deep, dark secrets. You don't need to hear all of my dirty laundry. But trust me, I had them. And I shared these deep, dark secrets with my higher power and my pressure group. We didn't call it pressure relief group then. It was pressure groups, came straight out of GA, Gamblers Anonymous. And they created pressure so that, the temperature got hot and you did something. No one was using sponsors at the time. No one laughed, no one judged, and both people identified with parts of the inventory. This was amazing. First, restored to sanity, then restored to being an accepted member of society, at least the group of debtors won, which was good enough in the
10
beginning.
minutes.
Thank you. So in step 6, I found there were some defects of character I had not revealed in my 4th and 5th step, but were known to me. I said that they were doing to me what they were doing to me and what I thought they were doing for me. So in other words, when you say you love some of your character defects too much, that's what 6 and 7 are for. I became entirely ready to have God remove these character maladjustments, which he calls these in the big book, because sometimes people don't like the word defects. And it was this willingness to do that increased my availability to receive attention, care, concern from my higher power and from the fellows that I had in DA. I thought I was holding back nothing. I later found out this was untrue. When I was ready to face asking for these perverse behaviors and mindset to be removed, I used the AA 7-step prayer. We didn't have a DA 7-step prayer at the time. For each and every defect on the list. When I finished saying the prayer, if I noticed I had back talk about being really ready to have that removed, I had to say it again until I had no back talk. So sometimes that involves saying it 11, 12, 13 times. I didn't put it all together. I did every defect separately. It was a day's project, believe me, many, many days. But this iterative process helped convert the shame and the humiliation I felt of all these things that I did, being a dirty debtor and having loads of profit and loss responsibility for companies. It converted it from humiliation for being so disabled and being such an adolescent and not a grown-up and running business like a charlatan to being humble instead, or so I thought. Then I got to step 8, where I swept back over my 4th step to see which people or institutions I had harmed and what I might do to make restitution. And since I'm a renegade Catholic, I was used to confession, so I thought that's what I was doing, but it was different. The list was long, and I felt pulverized by the list. Then I encountered a fellow who shared with me her forgiveness practice, that she could not hope to make the list of those she had harmed unless she first forgave them, one and all. So this involved my saying the sentence, I forgive so-and-so for, and whatever came to mind, or whatever was on my 8-step list or my 4th-step list even, whatever my grievance was. And then again, if after I said it, I had back talk, I had to say it again. And this comes from the Bible, she told me. So you have to forgive 7 times 70 times. In other words, 490 times. So I did a lot of talking. If you happen to ever live in New York City or know New York City, you see a lot of people talking on the streets to themselves. Well, I was one of those people because I was saying this forgiveness prayer over and over and over again. I continue to use this forgiveness method because A, I'm human, and B, I develop the equivalent of a new 8-step list almost every month, but it's handled in my 10th step. Doing this forgiveness step made step 9 an act of faith that higher power would see me through what I thought was the bitter end, as I revealed to people these nefarious acts that I had done, what I had stolen, what I had done to hurt them, having been callous, self-seeking, selfish, etc. I made amends to employers, friends, families, institutions, and you'd think I'd be done with debting forever. Coincidentally, higher power made it possible right after this, taking the 9th step, to get a mortgage to buy a home, despite the fact I had no credit, because I was doing everything on a cash basis, because I had paid my ex-husband's debts. And the credit collection agency became my credit reference. And I got a mortgage. That is a DA miracle. After 20 years of freedom from debt, I ran into something I never expected. Both my parents were ill and dying and living 100 miles from me. And I was running my own business, which I still have, and I was teaching at a university. I couldn't do it. And I stopped going to DA meetings. I actually didn't want to do the work anymore, probably. I thought I had arrived, graduated. That's the arrogance that sneaks in. And the idea of self-sufficiency. In the big book, it says self-sufficiency was no good whatsoever. In fact, it was a total liability. So I stopped paying taxes that year also. and I incurred 125,000 of IRS debt in 1 year. My parents died anyway. Didn't help, but I did.
That's 15, Meryl.
Okay, I'm going to have to go to the bitter end of 20. So I came back to DA in June 1st, 2010, and have been abstinent ever since. And I did everything differently. Somehow my first step had not really been complete. I thought I was doing the heavy lifting in my life, not my higher power. So that brings me to my daily practice, which is steps 10, 11, and 12. So I write a daily 10th step. And I start that 10th step with endorsements because I have a disease of negativity. If I start with all the things I did wrong, then I live in the negativity. So I start with what I did. How was I kind? How did I help somebody else? What courtesy did I render? What service might I have offered, etc. What hard thing did I do that I didn't want to do, and I did it anyway with God's help? Because I do everything with God's help. Whether I think I do or not, I do it with God's help. Especially very important to me. I live 10, 11 is, I do two things. First of all, I do repetitive prayer, very short prayers, not long prayers. Show me the way. This or something better, Lord, thy will be done. My guardian angel goes before me, protecting me from all harm. Relax, let go, let God. All of those are my short little prayers. I also do longer prayers periodically, but repetitive prayer is my primary part of the prayer portion of 11. And then I do walking meditation, which I was taught a long time ago in the middle of New York City. And I so far haven't been run over, so it does work. Using the mantra as a color, and I walk and I concentrate on that color, and I let go and I let God. So it's a combination. But the most important thing for me in 10, 11, and 12 is the second part of the 12th step. Practice these principles in all my affairs. Because if I don't do that, how can I sponsor? How can I be a pressure relief person? How can I lead a meeting? How can I even do service in the program, as an abstinent member? So so much, I have been freed from the bondage of self. That does not mean I am not a selfish person. Left to my own devices, I'll always want to go first, get the best portion of the food, do this, do that. I still have those things. That was early imprinting. How I got it, I don't know. It's like a tattoo. But the spiritual work is the frontier that I need to do in this level of recovery. I didn't do that kind of spiritual work early on. I did it by rote. I did it because someone told me, not because I actually saw that this is not a concept, you have to live it. So bringing that practice home is really important. So if sponsee asks me or a fellow calls me and says, I don't know what to do in this case. I say, well, what does your higher power say? And I first bring it back to that reflection because I don't know. Why are you asking another sick and suffering, compulsive debtor for advice in your life? How good a job did I do? I mean, I can talk about how I stay sober in this program. I can talk about what I do, but I can't give them advice in their lives. How do I know? But I always ask, what does God say? And the last thing I'll leave you was this. So years ago, I had a sponsor in another program, my first program. She told me this. I would be in some consternation about something. And I often brought my debting stuff to her as well, because she was a sponsor of mine for 34 years. I started my first program when I was in my 20s. And she'd say to me, did you pray? I said, no. She said, okay, 24 hours, go back and pray about this. And then come back to me. So 24 hours. So what did you learn? I don't have a clear direction yet. She said, okay, now you have to apply it has to go to a 48-hour prayer routine. So another 24 hours and then come back to me. All right, what do you have? I still don't have clear direction. Okay, back to the prayer and meditation. 72 hours. I come back, I still don't have. I said, okay, what's the next multiple of 24? And she said, no. If you have prayed and meditated on this question for 72 hours, the answer is to do nothing. So this is, in a very short period of time, everything that has been, it's kind of like, I feel like DA is like goose liver pate. sounds kind of violent, but it's like everybody else's process coming down into me and how I receive it and integrate it, and then how it permeates me. So I need to be like open to that. And I love the set aside prayer, which is not really a prayer anywhere you can find in any literature, except it's a compilation. So I'll just say it as I end. God, please enable me to set aside what I think I know for an open mind and a new experience. Show me the truth about the failure of my life run on self-will and my decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. And then that end, I'm Meryl, I'm compulsive debtor, business owner, and I'm here because I'm not all there. That's why I keep coming to DA. Thanks so much for having me. And back to you, Chris.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Meryl. I feel like you shared from the heart and you shared a lot of pithy things. That's really helpful for me. Okay, Meryl, would you like to, willing to share your contact information? And currently I see you're muted.
Okay. So you can see if you're on this, you can see it in my little Hollywood square, but otherwise you can call me on 917-912-2376, 917-912-2376. Always a good idea to text first and say who you are. Otherwise, I might think you are a cold call from China.
All right. Thank you, Meryl. Okay, so now it's time to stop the recording.